Today, I've got a very special guest, Dr. Liya Jacob. Dr. Liya Jacob is a health and life coach. She's a clinical nutritionist. She's also a consultant hematologist, mindfulness and creativity coach, and has published papers in type 2 diabetes remission and in weight loss. So it's going to be a really fantastic conversation today. We're also going to find out a little bit more about Dr. Liya Jacob as well. We bumped into each other on the street the other day,
I
and we
know.
didn't recognize each other, did we?
No, we just walked past each other, and I thought that's a familiar thing.
Of
Yeah,
all the places across the world, and we only live like literally a road away from each other, which
I
is
know. We're
crazy.
100 yards away from each other, and
It's a travesty, isn't it? We should really be doing this in person, but hey, here we are. So you mentioned something just before we got on the call around watching some news around GLP-1s, and I think it might be really interesting to go
yeah,
in and talk about what you've seen on the news recently.
yeah. No, so it was just a news article. It was so in the negative and about the problem, and that nearly a third of people now have obesity. The sort of calamity, the hopelessness of it all. That maybe the only way forward is the GLP-1 agonist injections, and that maybe we'll get people back to work. And it's just problem, 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 and we're doing something very wrong if everything is getting worse. And it's that we're stuck in the drama triangle. We're problem
Mm.
focused here. We're not thinking about the solution. And actually, I think the solution is much easier than we realize.
Really interested to know a bit more about what was it about the article on GLP-1s? What were they trying to kind of convey
That
in
that it
it?
was the answer, that it was the only hope, that that it sort of felt like there's nothing else is working. We've been trying for decades. This is the only hope for losing weight. And it was a few sort of case studies of people who've lost some weight.
Well, I think it's interesting because I've started seeing more adverts online for weight loss medicines.
Yeah.
There's now even older weight loss medicines like Orlistat. Just so for people's knowledge, GLP-1s are these new injections that were popularized in America. Apparently, 1 in 6 Americans have used a GLP-1. So these are these injections that people would usually take weekly. There's different ways of taking them, and they help people to lose weight fairly quickly. And usually the mechanism is around reducing appetite, but they have other effects as well. So Liya, I'd like to know your perspective on GLP-1s and where you feel that sort of sits in with type 2 diabetes and with weight loss. Now, they're distinct conditions, but often we know that they're often over closely related to each other.
So, I mean, I started this journey many years ago now, sort of 15 years ago now, sort of, and just obsessed. I was a consultant hematologist in the NHS, and it's a very good training, hematology training. You sort of really learn to understand a problem, to sort of really have a sort of beginner's mind. And these are really sick patients, and you need to sort of really understand. And then I have been a user. The real reason I came into this, I'm an expert patient. I have been a user of all the weight loss services. This is something I've tried out
Ah, this is
everything.
interesting.
Yes.
As a patient, you needed to lose weight at the time, or it was an experiment, or
So just through my life, just trying to lose weight. So I was probably in the obese category as a child. And so it was sort of a lifelong battle that I was doing everything that everyone said, but nothing ever stuck. What is going wrong here? And it was with that combined with the hematology training, I could say, I can smell a rat here. I could see the pattern. There's something systematically wrong in what we're trying to do here. And I could always solve problems in hematology. And then what happened next, I don't know if I'm deviating from your question, but what happened next is that I did this in the NHS. I got an opportunity to train in management training for a year, something called the Darcy Fellowship. And I was trained by the King's Fund and Manchester Business School. And it was the most profound year of my life. That happened in 2010. And I thought it was going to be sort of tools to change the system, but actually it was all personal development. And one thing that they put up a quote towards the end, and it was a quote by Marianne Williamson, and it was something like, it's not, we all think, who are we to do something, but actually, who are you not to do it? If you know that you can do something, who are you to hold that to yourself, and who are you to sit back and not do it? And because in hematology, I'd always been able to solve problems. I'd always been able to find, I don't do with this sort of beginner's mind thinking, I'd always be able to see this is the actual problem. Everyone assumes something and goes down the wrong direction, but there's something different going on. I knew I would be able to, I'd done that so many times. I knew I'd be able to bring that into nutrition. And I knew it'd be very painful and take a long time. But then I thought, there's two options in my life here. Either I stay in my consultant hematology job. I've developed type 2 diabetes. I had gestational diabetes 3 times. I could see the solutions being offered to me were wrong. And I just go down this path and I carry on my career and sort of feel safe in a way, but not, because what kind of life is that, sort of doing things that, going down this path when actually there's something I think I can be doing, and really.
Well, that's really interesting. We asked the question about GLP-1s, and now we've come into we've come into sort of the deeper understanding in the why of all of this, and we're
Yeah.
going to part GLP-1s then. So okay, we're going to answer that later on.
Yeah.
Let's go into this, because this kind of like, you're kind of like telling me about a kind of a coming of age story here.
Yeah.
There's a personal weight loss journey. There's insights being developed and personal growth with the Darzi Fellowship as well.
Yeah.
And then there's also a complete change with your career. And
Yeah.
many people, in fact, I know more and more doctors are letting go of the safe income, the
Yeah.
high incomes, the
Yeah.
high patient throughput, and the way in which treating quite complicated conditions.
Yes.
And now they're looking at lifestyle medicine as one of the ways in which to try and help patients.
Yes.
But it isn't a safe way to go. There isn't clear pathways to build a career. So just on your journey, let's try and split this up. So let's talk a bit more about the personal side. So you mentioned that as a hematologist, you could solve complicated things and you had to deal with complicated cases. But you were kind of suggesting that this wasn't working when you were trying to solve your own
Yes.
needs around trying to improve your own health.
Yes.
So what was it? What was the rat that you could smell?
One, I might get in trouble for saying this, but is that during every pregnancy, well, during the second pregnancy, I was put on insulin. And so I was put on insulin in the second and third pregnancies. But no one ever told me that insulin makes you gain weight. And that doesn't make sense to me. How, if the problem for the diabetes, the pathology in diabetes is fat gain, how can the treatment also be something that causes fat gain? And no one was telling me what kind of exercise I should do. There wasn't really any specific guidance how much protein I should be eating. And actually, I think there's a route to be very aggressive there. Hematologists can be very aggressive, I think, with protein intake and the kind of exercise that we should be actually prescribing and really supporting people to do. And I think that will be much more cost effective in the end. And so that's one rat. Another rat is the BMI. So, there's a sort of a map of consciousness made by David Hawkins. Shame is at the bottom when you say I am bad. You can feel that small. We say things like I felt small. You feel belittled. You can feel that what is that thing inside that feels small. You can feel this thing that shrinks. Whereas when you feel courageous, when you feel love, that bit in you, it gets bigger. And so what is that thing that we don't even talk about in conventional medicine? And when you go, if you have ever been in the obese category on the BMI, I think maybe you haven't, Kieran, but some of your viewers may have out there have
I've not been in the I've been in the overweight. I think my highest BMI was 27.
Yeah, but it just when you get there, it's just you can feel especially when you get into red, you're the worst. And even terms that we used to call it morbid obesity, now we call it class 3 obesity. These are such terrible terms, and because people just really shrink down. And then when you're down there, and then you tell someone, now you've got to do this journey that is going to be tough because you're being bombarded. You can't walk 5 yards these days without being constantly bombarded by junk food. So actually, you need to be that courageous, that big version of yourself to stand up and say, no, I'm enough to say what I'm going to eat, and I'm not going to be bombarded by things that people are telling me I should eat to sell something. So actually, that is another rat. Actually, we're pushing people down. They're taking on the victim role. And another rat is a sort of dynamic in the healthcare patient dynamic that which is, I think, is a sort of hang on from the sort of Victorian model of healthcare that doctors are the rescuers, the patients are the victims, and we need to save them. We need to come up with solutions to have them. Actually, Buddha says nobody can save you but yourself, and actually we need to really understand. So you can't change the situation until you really understand it. So you need to understand what are these roles in the drama triangle, and how do we sit in the empowerment dynamic? How do we help patients to actually not be to be creators in their own life, to be clients, to be the writers of their own destiny?
So let's just to summarize that. I picked up
Yeah.
you had gestational diabetes. They put you on a medicine that essentially doesn't treat the root cause. It helps to treat the symptom of the high glucose, but comes with all these other problems which actually perpetuate the underlying issue, actually potentially make it worse if we're thinking about the weight being part of it. Then they didn't teach you around the other key things around exercise, protein intake.
Yes.
There's this language issue around terms like BMI and morbid obesity and class 3 obesity. And I actually don't use any of these terms anymore. Well, now I stepped away from the medical model, I find it difficult to communicate with other healthcare practitioners sometimes, because I'm like, I'm not saying these words anymore. But I do think language is really important. And then you mentioned around this dynamic and the balance of power.
Yes.
All of that is really important. And it reminds me of a quote I actually read from your course, which is, I don't know, I can't remember who quoted it, but maybe you can tell me. It's the dreams are from the outside, but the power to change comes from within.
Yes, I
I've
think
completely messed that one up.
no. So I think it's Carl Jung. He who looks
Carl Jung,
inside. Yeah, he who looks inside. He who looks outside dreams, but he who
dreams.
looks inside awakens. Actually,
That's right.
all the deep learning is in here. Every time you think someone's causing a problem, you look inside and you find the
Mm.
answer. Always.
So there's a lot there. So let's talk about this gestational diabetes journey, because I think a lot of people who go on to become pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic later on have their first warning
Yes.
or sign of it when they have gestational diabetes.
Yes.
So take me through what actually happened during your consultation. So of course, this would have been, I'm assuming it was the third trimester, but perhaps it was earlier. Just let me know.
The first pregnancy, it was third trimester, but
Uh-huh.
that's only when we screen. So I suspect a lot of people are having this a lot earlier because we can only pick it up at the time that we screen. So in the first pregnancy, it
Mm.
was third trimester. Because I'm a hematologist, I'm detailed, I'm obsessive. That's what we train us to be like that. So from the next pregnancy, I wanted to know as soon as possible. So I started checking my blood sugars as soon as I was pregnant, which I think is what they advise to do once you've had it once anyway.
Would make sense.
Yeah, my blood glucose, I started losing control about 8 weeks the second time. And then they thought I might have type 2 diabetes. They sent me for all kinds of scans. I think I started treatment by 12 weeks just on tablets and insulin by about 16 weeks the second time. And so then I was just following the advice and I was eating the sort of amount of carbohydrates that I was freely eating carbohydrates, and the swings were it was
Mm.
wild. I just couldn't.
What was the nutritional support that you had?
I got and they were a lovely team. If they ever watched this, it was such a lovely team. But I got a leaflet for the dietitian appointment was a leaflet um,
Yeah,
for the complexity, for the amount of this is a nutritional problem and a nutritional and exercise problem that a leaflet's not going to do it, and it's a
yeah,
societal problem as well of this like bombardment with junk food and
yeah.
the state of
I think as the NHS, we love a leaflet, and part of our training as
yeah,
doctors is don't forget to give the leaflet out,
yeah,
otherwise you won't get maximum points.
yes,
And we
it's
get taught that from medical school.
yeah, and
Yeah,
really that was just it was not adequate. Um, and so
I
it
think
was
we're medically focused. I think that's a big thing around society, and it's moving slightly. With society is shaping that faster than medicine, but we've been so focused as thinking of medicine
yeah,
as pharmacology and tablets and
yeah,
medicine and actual tablets. We even call them medicines now.
yes,
Um, so I think that's a big issue. So now when we try and help people, when we say, oh, it's a nutritional issue or it's an
yeah.
exercise issue, it doesn't come under the realm of treating disease.
No,
Still, for many doctors, it's not recognized as
no.
treating disease.
But who cares what the treatment is? All like this is the problem focus, drama triangle. When we focus on problem, we think of solutions like leaflets and let's do things that hit the problem. When you
Yeah.
think of the solution, how do I get to the solution? I don't care what it looks like. I don't care whether you call
Mm.
it tablets or exercise or it's things that happen up here. I just want things that get you the fastest way to the solution. So then it just opens up your thinking.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the expertise that's available. You have all these appointments with your midwife and maybe a few appointments along the way with a consultant if you have gestational diabetes. But at no point, and maybe it's changing now, but at no point, I'm assuming in your journey,
No,
was
not
there regular follow ups with a dietitian or a nutritionist
no.
or a coach or
And
someone to actually sit down and work with your meals?
no, and I've spoken to relatives who've had more recent gestational diabetes, and I think they have had more dietitian input than I did at that stage.
Mm.
Mine was sort of 10 years ago, 10 to, yeah, 7 to 10 years ago. So that might be changing, but I still think there's a long way to go from,
Yeah.
yeah, to get to the solution, and we need to act faster.
I think there is a change in culture, and we've seen new groups forming, which is pushing that change in culture. For
Yeah,
example, we've now got the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, we have the UK IACA, which is for health coaches,
yes,
and they are all pushing agendas, which is showing people that actually there is another way. And with the real grow movement around nutrition and social media,
yeah,
yes, there's a lot of polarization, but I think the fact that people are talking about it, people are
yeah,
starting to realize that nutrition is impacting on health. And I
yeah,
think a lot of that is actually to do with the gut as well. People got really excited about the gut being
yeah,
a really key organ in terms of
yeah,
keeping us healthy.
yeah. Um,
So going back to the GLP-1s,
mm.
where does that fit into all of this, these injections?
Well, so I think we're going to come on. I keep taking us sideways.
Oh,
While
no.
but I think so. I think a lot of our focus, a lot of the interventions, not as just GLP-1s, but a lot of our focus is on weight loss, and we assume we're targeting weight loss. In my recent review about normal weight and overweight obesity, and physical activity and nutritional interventions that helped, it sort of found that actually when people have a normal weight and overweight, which is nearly 75% of the population, a lot of people who have type 2 diabetes fall into these categories, but we don't want to lose weight in those categories. We want to lose fat. And actually, this whole issue, we've got it wrong. We've been thinking that weight loss is the same as fat loss. It's not. It's not the same thing. It's the answer to the question, how do I lose weight, which is what we're mostly asking. GLP-1 agonists plus low calorie diets, are actually a lot of these interventions that we're doing. It's all about how do we lose weight. But actually, the issue is that diabetes is not caused by overweight, because if you look at a bodybuilder, an athlete, they may have a really high weight. They may be in the morbid obese category, but they don't have type 2 diabetes. So weight cannot be the problem. It is not about weight. It is adiposity that's the problem.
I think it's so glaringly obvious that people would
Yes.
look at a bodybuilder and would just like, no, they're not
Yes.
going to have type 2 diabetes. And
Yes.
yes, they're going to have a much heavier weight than someone who isn't
Yes.
a bodybuilder. But
It's
sometimes they're not just
obviously
putting two and
extreme.
two together. What's it called? Sorry?
It's obvious in the extremes, but
Yes,
all those people in the middle, they might have the same issue at a slightly lower level, that actually they have a high muscle mass,
absolutely.
high weight, and it's not. So you have to look at the truth is in the extremes. We sort of say that bodybuilders having a high BMI is some kind of aberration when we dust it under the carpet. Actually, bodybuilders having a high weight and BMI is the proof that it's a load of nonsense.
Absolutely. We're looking at the extremes and it tells us the
The
answers
truth.
in a way.
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
truth.
so for viewers, this question about GLP-1s,
Yes.
about whether it's the answer, is going to be
No.
the narrative throughout this
Yes.
conversation. I think we're
Yes.
going to keep coming into it and out of it. And I think there's an answer for you there, that if you're just focusing on weight loss,
Yes.
it's not actually what we
Not
should
the
be
answer.
focusing on. It's fat loss.
You don't want to lose the muscle. The muscle is your metabolic power. So if you are blindly losing weight, I've done this all my life. When you go on these low, and all the approach, there's one type of approach that I tried. All the diets that I did out there were about calorie restriction. It's low calorie, starving yourself a bit, getting your weight down. Then you're losing muscle mass. You're sarcopenic at the end of it, and then you swing back up because actually you can eat less than when you started off. It's all this swinging thing because we're focusing on weight loss. You mustn't lose the good stuff. It takes hard work to build it up, and it's madness that we're cycling like this.
So I really want to delve into the personal experiences, because I think it is a really powerful narrative for people to hear. But of course, we're scientists as well.
Yes.
And so we want to, and this is something that's happening in social media. Often people say, this is what I eat in a day, this is what I do. This doesn't apply to everyone.
No.
But when we look at individual cases, it can actually give us more nuance to actually what's happening at population-based data. But you got these two papers that I want to just come to.
Mm-hmm.
When was the first one published?
First one, I think, was 2021.
Yeah, 2021. And then the most recent one was just in December, wasn't it? Just gone, December 2024. Now, what I really like is that there's a difference in the narrative and the thinking between your 2021 paper and your 2024 paper. And I think that's a sign of the whole body of science and knowledge around this changing pretty quickly.
Yes.
So if what would be great, so just to really understand the 2021 paper, and I'm kind of saying this also so people can see what's happened in the last few years.
Yeah.
The 2021 paper was really focused around type 2 diabetes remission, but you were really looking at weight loss as the goal without looking at body composition.
And in the obese category.
In the obese category, which we would term as, what would be your right terminology for people?
People with obesity? Is that what you said? People first language?
Yeah, I guess so. With obesity, I tend to use...
I think it's all wrong. So I think the whole concept of obesity is wrong. So I don't think it really matters. I don't think we even should be talking about it.
I mean, I tend to use overweight rather than any other terminology.
All wrong, because someone who is strong, someone who's got good body composition, might be in that overweight category or in that. So it's a load of nonsense. Just whatever
totally.
You want to call it.
Okay. So look, there's something that needs to be defined in the future, that we need to get terminology right on this. Yeah, that paper was in 2021 really focused on weight loss as a form of achieving remission.
Yes.
And for people who are in the overweight or obese category.
Yes.
And then in 2024, you changed the narrative.
Yes.
You've started to look more around different and comparing different ways of weight loss, but also changing body composition as well. So I just want to have a look at 2021, see where we were at,
Yeah.
and then come into what's really exciting right now. So what
Mhm.
was going on in 2021 within that paper?
I think the direct study had been published and everyone was talking, and then there was sort of the Michael Mosley's Fast 800. So everyone was talking about fasting and 800 calories, and so that was, it was just everywhere. So I just really wanted to know, does this work, and what, and so we compared all the interventions that used just only looking at calorie and energy restriction. So it was quite a sort of, a hyper focused review.
So it's the calories
Yeah,
story, really, which you were
calorie
looking at.
story, only asking the calorie story, does it work?
And one of the findings was that to try and achieve diabetes remission, one should try and lose more than 10% of their weight.
Yes, but nearly all of the studies in there were looking at people with obesity, people in that high BMI, high adiposity category. There weren't any bodybuilders in there. So it's quite, and actually nearly 75% of the population don't have obesity. So this is one of the big problems. This is one of the rats that we are taking research.
Sorry, just say that again, because that is not what I know. 75% of the
75%
population.
do not have obesity. We take, so there's people with underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese. And the statistic that we take, the drama triangle problem focus statistic that we take, is we add um, overweight and obesity, and we put them together. And
Yeah.
we get a number like 66 or something like that. 66% of the population are overweight or obese. Doom and gloom, hopelessness.
Okay.
What are we going to do?
So for the viewers,
Yes.
we have kind of said already, and your view is that BMI isn't the right tool to use. But
Yeah.
when we're talking about definitions, we're using BMI. So because that's what's accepted right now.
Yeah.
So when you say obesity, do you mean a BMI of over 30?
Over 30. Only it's about 25% of the population, just over 25% of the population fall into that BMI over 30. And yet also that's only a quarter of the population, approximately a quarter of the population, or slightly over a quarter. All the research we're doing is on this category of people. And yet a recent study showed that people in the normal weight and overweight, so BMI 25 up into 30, they respond quite differently to dietary interventions than people in the over 30 category. So actually, it's another rat there that we're taking. We're
Okay.
applying the wrong research.
God, there's rats all over the place. It's like the London Underground, isn't it? And a few mice hanging around too. Okay, this study, there was something else that was really important from actually. So it's not all bad. This study was really helpful actually. It tells
Yeah.
people there's a way, there's an answer. One
Yeah.
of the answers is weight loss. But as we come into 2024, we'll realize that it perhaps isn't necessarily the one thing to look at, and there's other better ways.
I think the really useful thing from the study, there's a graph that shows the likelihood of remission over time.
Yes, that's really helpful.
Straight line. The longer you wait, the less likely you are to achieve a remission. That's the most important finding in that review. So actually, within 6 years, the pancreas might burn out. And actually, if you go 1 or 2 years after diagnosis, it's all nearly reversible. So really, in the pre-diabetes stages, in the early stages, you need to go hard and fast.
So when you say 6 years, are you talking 6 years of diagnosis of type 2 diabetes?
Yes, but yet, some people might have had it for a while before they get diagnosed, but we know once you've had the diagnosis, probably 6 years. I think in one of the studies, there was someone who was at 20 years or something and still achieved a remission. So you must never give up hope. You must always go for it, because you never...
Absolutely. And I think we as we see more patients, clients, we actually develop a nuanced understanding of who we know is realistically going to be able to get there. So I think I just want to give hope to people that it's not pre-diabetes, it's a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. And because of the blood testing that we're doing in the NHS at age 40, we're picking up more cases earlier, especially the pre-diabetes range. So if you've had pre-diabetes for a very long time, or you've had pre-diabetes, say, for 5 years, and then you go on to develop type 2 diabetes,
from that point,
officially, you'd still be within the 6 years.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I just want to reiterate this for people, is that even if you've had diabetes for more than 7 years, if remission isn't a realistic possibility, you want to get that blood glucose down to really good control, even if that requires medicines, because that's reducing your risk massively with other things. So there's always hope wherever you are in your diabetes journey. Okay, so then we move to 2024. What changed between 21 and 24?
So one thing is that just noticing there's three people. So it's you're sort of throwing yourself when you start a business. When you're starting in this new part, you sort of described at the beginning that it's not easy. There's not a defined path, no defined training, and so it's just sort of and there's rats out there. So you're sort of learning as you go. And one thing is I had one client who came to see me who had fatty liver disease. So I put it out there wanting to reverse type 2 diabetes, but also all kinds of people started coming to me, and he had a BMI of 25. And I had been marketing a weight loss program at the start. I thought that hematology, there's something wrong here. He's got a BMI of 25, and I'm trying to put him on a weight loss journey. And there's lots of healthy people out there with a BMI of 25. Does he need to lose weight? And I started doing all the same things. And then and that's and even the fact that there's studies in this new review that are about weight loss, we're still thinking like that at a normal weight and overweight, that we still need to lose weight. And it was, and he did make progress, but I knew there's something that was one thing that stuck in my head. Something's not right here. Then I had a colleague contact me, a very clever senior colleague who had pre-diabetes, who was so lean. And I thought, how does she have pre-diabetes? Unless it's some kind of autoimmune thing. And she said she's had that, it's not autoimmune. How is she getting pre-diabetes? And then a relative had type 2 diabetes. And someone else made the comment that actually a lot of Asian people who get type 2 diabetes, they're not even in the obese category. They're just a bit soft in the tummy, and you can see their shape has changed, but they're not. We've been chasing weight with all the sort of studies, and all the sort of media is about reducing your calories, losing weight. But actually, the people who I'm seeing who are actually getting metabolic problems, sometimes they're not even overweight, sometimes they're normal weight. So what is going on here? So that just became my,
Well, we've seen a redefinition, haven't we, on the BMI? So 18 to 25 for white people
yes,
or Caucasian, depending on your terminology, and for South Asian, Black, African, and other minority ethnic,
yeah,
I'm mixing up my words here.
yeah.
Ethnic minorities,
Yes.
it's 23. But I would say for all non-white populations, it's 23. But we've reframed the number. But what do you think about that?
I think it's all nonsense. If you read my review, I think we're chasing the wrong thing. We're chasing a parameter. The BMI is only defined by your height and your weight. It doesn't look at your constitution. It doesn't look at your body fat
Right.
or your muscle mass. So it doesn't matter how you define it, where you put the cutoff. We're chasing up. We're going around in circles here because it's the wrong target.
Okay. So you have pitched the idea to bin the BMI.
In the BMI, I think we will make massive progress once we've been the BMI.
Okay. You have made a very good case so far.
Yes.
And before we started this conversation, I was aware of some of the difficulties around BMI, but I haven't been convinced to bin the BMI.
Mm.
And my thought on that was just, that. Can you tell me what you think about this? So the BMI is applicable to people who do not exercise frequently or do not look after their muscle. What is your thoughts around that?
I think it's so shaming if you have been on the receiving end of, being categorized and it's usually slim people who are at the other end telling you that your BMI is in the red category. That creates that power dynamic. You've lost that person already.
Well, you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't. If you're overweight as a doctor and you tell
Yes.
someone you're overweight,
Yes.
they'll just look at you and be like, well, so are you. And if you're slim, you tell someone you're overweight, they're like, well, it's all right for you to say, isn't it? You don't have to deal with what I'm going through.
Yes. So I think it's that you'll damn yourself if you talk about it's a damning thing. So just don't do it. It's not helpful. Actually, people need to not focus on this shaming, but actually empowering. We need to go this opposite direction of what we need to be doing. We need to be building people up to go on this journey.
How do we change it then? So let's imagine we've gone into the consultation room and you're the doctor and I've come in and there's type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes on my blood tests. Yes. And for the sake of people understanding, the BMI is over 25. So it's in the official category over 25, so in the overweight category. How would you tackle this conversation? How should we do it differently?
So, I mean, I'm very lucky in that the people who come to me are quite self-selecting and they're ready to go and they have some metabolic complications. So just remind me, they have a metabolic complication already?
Yeah, let's say they have pre-diabetes or they have a fatty liver.
Because I think the other thing is there can be plenty of people in the overweight and obese categories who are perfectly healthy, who have a good ratio of muscle to fat. This isn't a
Yeah.
problem about absolute weight. This is a problem of a ratio of our ratio of muscle to fat. So actually, the people who are in perfectly healthy and happy with themselves, leave them alone. That's not where our resources should go. Let them be happy. Let them just leave them alone. It's the people with metabolic complications, and the people with metabolic complications can be in the obese category, but they can be in the normal weight and overweight categories. So actually, focus should be on metabolic removing, helping people come back on their metabolic complications. So we don't need to actually talk about weight in this at all.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't think I think we've identified a discrepancy here, a problem, but I don't think there's a clear answer, because we're saying that obviously it's not about weight and it's not about this scale called the BMI.
Yes.
But at the same time, there's still an issue with fat. But the word fat is a stigma as well.
Yes, probably. And yeah, so I thought about this a lot, but there's something about the BMI where they make it green, yellow, and red. And with adiposity fat, there is no normal range. So you could have, a curvy woman is going to have a much, and so just nobody has defined a normal range. So I don't think that it's that we need to get into any particular target. If you are having metabolic complications, you probably just need to reduce it a bit until you get rid of those metabolic complications.
Well, as doctors verging on their science side of their thinking, they love a good number to demarcate who's in and who's out.
Yeah.
We love our parameters on our blood results, etc. So, but what about, but I do think that there's going to be some more clarity coming in the next 5 years as to what is the right body fat percentage, what is the right body muscle percentage, but whether it is negative or positive in terms of how we drive the narrative, I do think that's going to happen.
I think if you just look at 10 people in a room, we are all different sizes and shapes, and you can see what is achievable for one person is not what is for another. That's why I just think maybe a 5% reduction or a 10%, it might be a percentage reduction is what it should be the target, rather than a absolute number. So when you put absolute numbers on everybody, when we're different sizes and shapes, it doesn't work. So a percentage reduction might be the target.
So, okay, language is important. We've got that. So what is it then now that we're looking at that's different in a few years down the line in your next study? What did you look at that was different?
So then we sort of, before we were zoomed in on if you look at the BMI, we were zoomed in on people with obesity, looking specifically at energy restriction, calorie restriction. But now in this study, we're zooming back, and we're looking at now the normal weight and the overweight categories, and we're looking at any intervention that works. So not just calorie energy restriction, and the intervention. So we looked at all the data from the last 10 years, and we only found 7 studies studying people with normal weight and overweight obesity. And I think that's really interesting that actually all the research that we're doing out there is in people in the obese category. So we really don't have much data.
So what's the difference between all of these terms? So normal weight, overweight obesity, and normal weight obesity.
So normal weight obesity is sort of a well-defined condition now. It's a fairly recent definition. But normal weight, that category, so I said there's underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese on the BMI chart. Normal weight falls between a BMI of 18.5 to 24.9. And overweight falls between 24.9 to 29.9. And then when you go over 30, that's in the obese category. So in that normal weight category, you can be in that 18.5 to 24.9, and you can have raised body fat or normal body fat. If you've got raised body fat, you've got normal weight obesity. And then no one really researches overweight at all. So we thought actually we might pick up some more data here. This is really important to research. So we made our own definition of overweight obesity using the same methodology. So 24.9 to 29.9 on the BMI scale, with raised adiposity, overweight obesity.
So this is really interesting. This is not a universal scale. This is a scale that you've looked at based on your study, and you've defined these new terms.
Yeah.
And I find what's really interesting is that you've coined the term obesity can be anywhere in the scale. It's not just having a BMI over 30.
Exactly.
And you mentioned to me off camera that most studies have only been monitoring people with a BMI of over 30.
Yes.
So now we're into a category of people who are technically normal weight on a standard BMI scale, but have excess fat.
Yes.
Which is the normal weight obesity.
Yes.
And then there's overweight obesity, which is at 24.9, 25 to 30.
Yes.
And that's most of the population who have a BMI of over 25.
Yes, and this is the meat of the problem, because we're seeing rates of pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes skyrocket, and yet nearly 75% of the population don't have obesity. So there's a problem here somewhere.
But people aren't studying this either. They're
No,
not studying this group of people.
no. And the thing is, Kieran, that, I've been banging on about this for years now. I've been on my soapbox saying it. But what I've realized is that actually human beings, we're mostly not motivated by the truth. We think we are, but actually what most people want is to do what everyone else is doing. So even if someone, it's like the emperor's new clothes, you're like shouting out, this is the truth of it. This is not about weight. This is not about BMI. This is about adiposity in all categories. But people look through you. You can feel they're looking through you. Yeah, but everyone's having the injections.
This
Yes,
sounds like
everyone's doing the 800-calorie diet. Yeah, but my mate, it's like there's two things that motivate us. It's not the truth. One is doing what everyone else is doing, and it's just like an ancient sort of primitive drive. You look at a flock of birds, the safest.
Well, I remember the Peloton craze in 2020. I was like,
Exactly.
why is everyone buying these big lumbering machines?
Yeah, there's Simon Sinek did a really interesting talk that, when 14, that it all begins with Y or something like that it's called, but when 14% of the population do something, everybody
14.
does. 1-4. That's all it is. So, which is really good to know, because when 14% of the people actually start doing the right thing, everyone will do it. So the population will tip. But if 14% of the population hit the injections, everyone's doing it. So even if you tell them the truth, they'll just look over your shoulder and say, but everybody, they're not driven by the truth. And the second thing that drives people is that our brain, there's a triune brain theory that actually, our heart and kidneys evolved until we had a best fit model. But our brain is an amalgam of different times in our evolution. And our brainstem in coaching, we call it the critter brain or the lizard brain, and it's constantly on high alert. It's looking for danger. Is there a change? Is anything changing? We want to keep everything the same. So if you've ever, had a new computer system at work, you remember that sort of cold, clammy feeling, oh God, it's going to be awful. And then you sort of, so you notice the change.
I've quit a job over a new computer system at work.
The uproars that happen at work, like there's like nearly revolutions happen at work.
People are doing it.
The new computer system, and everyone notices a change, lizard brain, and then it goes to your limbic system, and you have an anxiety, a fear response, and then we rationalize thoughts in our prefrontal cortex. We make up reasons why we need to get rid of this new computer system. It might be the best system ever made, but we just don't want to change. So actually, these two dangerous things for population health, that we only want to do what everyone else is doing and we want nothing to change, keeps us very stuck. And we rationalize all kinds of things to keep us safe in that position.
It looks like this has been a major case of groupthink in terms of designing studies. And we're just keeping people over 30, BMI over 30, and designing studies where most people are not that.
Yes, most people are not that. We are not. And if you athletes are probably laughing at the rest of the population, this is so easy. We just work out a bit. We eat a lot of protein. And look at me. This is guy who does perfect. Like, this is so easy.
So what were the big findings in this 2024 study then?
Sorry, I've gone off track.
But the thing is, once you see the answer, once you see the light, once you see the clarity, there's no going back.
There's no going back. So the big findings are, we found studies that looked at energy restriction, that looked at high protein intake. There was one exercise study, a HIIT study, and there was a high fiber study, a sort of viscous polysaccharide, an artificial fiber study, and there was a lifestyle intervention study. And the most promising, the HIIT intervention, that exercise study, had the highest impact on body fat. Next was a high protein intake. Surprise, surprise, this is what the bodybuilders are doing, exercising and eating protein. And the worst intervention for body fat was energy restriction, which is what we're all doing.
Okay.
And
wow. Okay. Okay, so let's just rank these. Yeah. If you want to do what do you want to achieve? Is it weight loss or
fat loss?
Fat loss. Yeah. So if we want to lose fat, number one is HIIT. How many times is it? Is it 2 or 3 times a week?
It doesn't necessarily have to be HIIT, because we only found 7 studies, remember? And so in the discussion, so in the sort of main body of the systematic review, you can only look at the studies that you've got. In the discussion, you look out further into the sort of field of knowledge, and actually most exercises are good for you and will have an impact. Aerobic on its own, so if you're just running, that may not be as effective for losing body fat, but anything that's got some resistance, or a combination of aerobic and a resistance. If that resistance is like body weight or yoga or Pilates, any kind of exercise is the top one. I'd say exercise.
Okay, so we studied HIIT, but exercise overall is your number one thing.
Yes.
For fat loss. Number 2 is increasing your protein intake.
And
Number
actually, it's
three,
probably a combination, which is what they're
this
doing.
combination.
A combination.
And then number three is fiber.
So fiber it didn't really have that much of an effect, but I think
Okay.
we know sort of with common sense that having
And then for why is energy loss number four?
is the worst because people were losing. So there's a really interesting review by Magcos in 2022, I think it was, or 2020. So it was quite a recent review. But he looked at energy restriction in people with and without obesity. So this is pure, simple energy restriction where they're not increasing the protein intake. And so he defined obesity as a BMI of greater than 28. People with a BMI greater than 28 lost more fat than lean muscle mass. That's who we're looking at, this approximate 25% of the population. That's where all the studies we're looking at, that's what we're finding, that if you energy restrict people, that was my first review, we're energy restricting these people and they're losing more fat than muscle. That's why we're getting good
And
results.
what about below 28? What's the
Below
answer?
25, this is a really important finding, they lose equal amounts of muscle and fat. So if you're
Okay.
trying to improve, see, remember the problem is the ratio of
So
muscle.
what okay, just so people understand, why is this a problem? What's the problem with losing a bit of muscle as well?
So the problem with type 2 diabetes is not your absolute weight. Remember, because bodybuilders can be very heavy. We look in the extreme, we'll find the truth. Bodybuilders can be heavy. This isn't a problem of absolute weight. This is a problem of the ratio of muscle to fat. If you lose, by pure energy restriction, if you lose equal amounts of muscle and fat, your ratio is not changing. You're no better off. It's like cutting off an arm or something. You're just a smaller version of the same problem.
That's really, really important. And I think a lot of people misunderstand type 2 diabetes. We
Yes,
look at insulin resistances when we say insulin resistance is the cause of type 2 diabetes. It is not. We've got to ask what is driving the
yes,
insulin resistance.
yes,
And it's all got to do with the amount of receptors on cells. When our cells are full with fat, we
yes.
close off receptors to the insulin, close off the receptors to the insulin, then you can't get the glucose out of the bloodstream into the cells. So if you're saying that we keep the same proportion of fat to muscle,
Yes,
we've got essentially, like you said, a smaller version
yes.
of what's going on. So the same processes are happening. We haven't changed anything.
No, and if you look at the studies, the energy restricted studies, they exactly that happened that Magcos described, that they lost equal amounts of muscle and fat. And that's why when you looked at their body fat percentage, it decreased a little bit, but not much. They had the worst results because they had lost lean muscle mass. Your muscle mass is like your factory for storing insulin. It's where for storing glucose. It gives all your glucose goes sit in your muscles, and so
Yeah,
you need to increase your muscle mass to solve it.
absolutely. I think a great fact that I love is that you don't even need insulin to drive glucose into muscles. It can bypass the insulin pathway and you can get direct glucose uptake into muscles. Muscles is so key. I think this tells me a little bit about potential ethnic or race bias with studies as well, because if we're lowering the BMI to
Yes,
23,
yes,
then more people are in this normal weight, overweight category,
yeah,
but we've actually just changed the numbers.
yes.
So then we're going to have more problems
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
in
When
the people that have the most
yeah,
problems with type 2 diabetes,
yes,
and which are the non-white Caucasian populations,
yes,
non-white populations.
yes. They're all then they all start all our whole approach is energy restriction. They're just getting more of the sense of this is why we're stuck. Yet everyone wants to do the same and to do what everyone else is doing.
Right, protein. Protein's a big one because um, there's an interesting narrative going on right now.
Yeah,
I'll just kind of introduce this narrative on protein.
yeah,
We've got government guidelines ranging between zero 0.7 grams per kilo to zero point
yeah.
0.8 grams per kilo. We have nutritionists suggesting and dietitians suggesting that we need around 1 gram per
Mm,
kilo. And then we have many people in the fitness industry saying you need 2 grams per
yes,
kilo.
yes,
Then we've also got people on the Zoe podcast,
yeah,
looking at all the papers and saying that only 1% of the population have a protein deficiency, and
yeah,
that actually we're getting more than enough protein in our diets, and
yeah,
that zero point 0.8 grams per kilo is just a safe net. And in fact, we're all hitting that.
yeah.
Your study looks at 1.2 grams,
I think 1.1 was 1.8.
1.8.
1.8 in one of them. I have to double check.
So what is it? So just to clarify for this arm, this was a study not looking at the amount of exercise, but actually just about increasing your protein intake from plant-based protein sources. It was just plant-based
Yeah,
because it was soy, wasn't it?
saw it. Yeah,
Okay,
but we haven't compared the type of protein in any of these studies. There was only two
fine.
studies that used.
But it was a complete protein, wasn't it, that they were getting? So it was all amino acids, I
Um,
think.
I need to double check it.
I think it was. But let's make the assumption that it was. You found, or this study found, that it was 1.8 grams per kilo, which was the ideal amount.
Well, I don't think it found. I don't think you can say that because that's what
Okay.
they use. So we didn't look at a number of ranges and say what is the ideal. Actually, I think this is a really important point that you've raised. That actually this is one of the unknown unknowns. How much is the ideal amount of protein? And I think this is actually probably quite a complicated question. And I think there's
Yeah.
someone to make an app in the future that tracks. So I think we tend to calculate it on body weight, but that can't be true because an athlete who's pure muscle compared to someone who's quite adipose, they can't possibly need the same amount of protein. So it must
Mm.
depend on your lean muscle mass, which who knows what that is anyway.
Yeah.
So actually, we probably need to invent something that calculates your lean muscle mass, your activity, what you're targeting to do. So it probably is quite a variable thing between people. But I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
zero point 0.8 grams per kilo is the recommended daily allowance. Recommended daily allowance is a minimum amount to avoid disease. We're just trying to avoid disease with 0.8. So that can't
Mm.
possibly be enough to get into health. The whole medical model is about battling the problem by focus. How do we avoid the disease? It's not enough. That bar's too low. We
Yeah.
need to get into health.
There's two ends of this, isn't it? It's disease prevention versus health
Yes,
optimization.
yes,
And
yes,
we're looking at numbers around disease prevention
yes,
and avoiding that 1% deficiency
yes,
rate that's currently happening.
yes,
But then there's a difference
yes,
around the optimal
yes.
level. And
And
everyone's optimal level is going to be different as well,
slightly
isn't it?
different. What I recommend to my clients is to go for 1.5. And I think
Yeah.
probably as your lean mass increases, I would say that going up to that 2 is probably, and you're working
Yeah.
out, going up to that 2 is probably better. But as a starter, if
Yeah.
you have a higher body fat ratio, probably 1.5 feels about right to me. But
I have to say,
yeah,
I think that as well. I mean, in my practice, we started at 0.7, then we went to 0.8, then
yeah,
we're at 1,
yeah,
and now we range between 1 to 1.5,
yeah,
1.6. That's
yes,
where we're sitting. But
yeah,
it's really interesting. Your study has really provided more light onto that. But
yeah,
I think people have to get away from just looking at the three macros. It
yeah.
is around
Also,
macros meaning carbs, fat, protein.
I
It
would
is more
really
about
like
the
to know,
quality.
because I think there's a sort of myth about protein and kidney disease, but I would really like a sort of multi-center national trial to really understand
I
if
think this has been dealt with, no? I thought
I think so, but with established, even after all this research, with established
with
kidney disease,
established.
yeah, how much protein can people safely have? Because I think we have
Sure.
unadulterated amounts of carbohydrate. I do wonder whether high carbohydrate levels with established kidney disease might be more damaging than high protein.
I did
We need a study there.
I did do some research on this with one of my patients with CKD,
Yeah.
and we were careful with the protein.
Yes. So how careful do we have
But
to be? And especially
yeah, absolutely.
diabetes. And this is these
Absolutely.
are really important questions that we need to answer.
I really want to just cover a couple more
Yes.
on this study, and then I want to know about all the failed things in your personal journey that you tried that people should just avoid. So, this polysaccharide,
Yes.
this thing, it was like what was it? It was a fiber, so it was non-absorbable,
Yes.
and they didn't find a massive change.
They didn't find no, it didn't have much effect at all.
But I think the key thing here is that this fiber was not a fiber that's typically found. It's a synthetically made fiber.
Yeah, so it's synthetically made fiber. A lot of this is that we know we have evidence-based medicine. We are producing data at exponential rates. And it really,
Yeah,
having done this master's in clinical nutrition, it is, and read it, if you've ever read the Cochrane Handbook for Systematic Reviews, to
I
actually
haven't.
really, it is like tome, whatever the word is, tome of so dry, but to
And
really
what is this book? Just let people know what this
oh yeah,
book is about.
it's just all the rules about how you write studies, how you interpret
Yeah,
studies, about the statistics. It is actually a very complex thing to understand a paper, to understand the quality of the paper, to understand whether you should, and you can't cherry pick one paper on its own. You have to look at the entirety of the
you
data
do.
on one question. And so I've just done that with that normal weight. That took me 2 years and 9 months. So the issue we have is
Yeah.
a really interesting book. What's it called? There's a real, I can't remember this. It's Edwin. There's a
We'll have to look it up. We'll find it and put it in the notes.
yeah, but it's basically saying that we're having a crisis of leadership now because we are starting to. So when we are in the drama triangle, when we
Yeah.
focus on problems, we get anxious, And a symptom of anxiety is to gather data. This is what human beings do. They start gathering data thinking it's going to solve the problem when they get anxious. Actually, the only way out of the bind is that you need to use, there's two ways we gather data. One is through analysis, looking at, gathering data, studies, using our senses to gather data. The other way is through our gut instinct, our spidey sense, our sixth sense, common sense. And we need to use our common sense to make decisions and to take action. That is the only way out. But yet we're just gathering data and we are logicking ourselves into confusion. So actually, there has to be an equal balance of data and common sense.
Yeah.
So
And in a way, then action has to happen based on it rather than continuing to assimilate more data. But this thing around fiber, I think what people need to know is that this was a synthetic fiber. It wasn't looking at the health benefits of fiber.
No, fiber is good for you. People who are healthy eat a high fiber diet.
Yeah.
So,
And so I think if we were to look at the fiber story, we couldn't take what you had in this paper as such. We'd have to look at fiber from different sources in a different way, perhaps. But the reason why I can see why you include this, because this was a controlled way of having one type of fiber and comparing it.
I included everything that was out there. And this is one of the studies.
Okay. So your journey with your own health with regards to weight.
Yes.
You said that you were overweight or you had excess weight as a child.
Yes.
And then you tried lots of things.
Yes.
So I think people would be really interested to know why you found it so difficult and what were the things that you tried on your journey.
I think energy restriction was what the main strategy from childhood up until I started sort of weight training and things in older age.
How was your success with that?
Never. Like, you do it, you grit your teeth and you're like, oh, and that shame comes over you to start with, and then it sort of builds your want up. You're like, I don't want to be in this bad place. In the drama triangle, the victimhood, the victim, poor me place is the one you want to escape the most, because everyone's coming and telling you, or you look fat. Some helpful auntie comes and tells you, your darling.
You can't win in Indian culture. You're either too skinny or you're too fat. You're never in between.
The cues are forming to come and tell you, you need to go and sort yourself out. So constantly I was like, right, I'm going to do this one and that one, and I'd do them. And it was energy restriction.
So when you say energy restriction, what were the actual things that you were doing?
Well, I think there's a lot I think the BMI is driving eating disorders. It's like you're like starving yourself, like just living on lettuce and or even more recently, like at the early part of this journey, doing a lot of time restriction. I remember the once I was trying to do one meal a day, and that was, and you do lose in the short term, you do lose loads of weight, but a lot of that was muscle. And then people tell you look fat, God, you're so skinny now, and patting you on the back, your BMI has gone into green. You're like, you're winning. And then
how did you feel when it went into green? What was that feeling?
Finally, like, I am worthy. You sort of feel this, I am worthy, I'm okay, I'm enough. Based on the BMI, it's such a load of nonsense.
And
then it's not sustainable, because you can eat even less than when you started the whole journey, because you've lost muscle mass at the end when you've done a really long-term.
So your basal metabolic rate is what we know has gone down. You've got less muscle mass.
So you go back to your normal diet and you balloon and you feel ashamed. And you're like, oh, what's
so
wrong?
You're just going up and down, up and down.
Yo-yoing.
Did you sign up to any programs to help you, or did you just sort of say, this is my portion size and I'm going to restrict?
I've done lots of different programs. I don't know if I should name and shame them.
That's fine. But you've tried, I'm assuming, national type programs, private ones.
Private. And the things that did help were PTs, but yet there was something missing. There's something. So there's a really
What was missing there?
So I've done so many trainings over the last few years. I was like, right, I'm all in. Anything that looks like the answer, I'm doing it. And so there's someone called Ron Davis who's done a lot of work into neurodiversity, and he has a 3-universe theory that we live in 3 realms of experience: the physical, cause and effect, the thoughts, so the mental activity, and the intentions. This is where motivation, want, desires, that all sits. Everything we're doing in medicine is about the physical universe. It's like it's drugs, it's surgery, we might even go as far as nutrition. We're starting to think about nutrition, but that's still in the physical universe. What about the mental? This is 2 whole universes that we're not even looking at: the thoughts and the motivation. And that's really why I trained to be a health coach, because actually a third of the problems up here, a third's here, and only a third is down here. So how do you train in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP? Like, sometimes there's misbeliefs, there's identity problems. If you think I'm an unhealthy person, no matter, we call it a fake through, no matter how you do this intervention, you do all the stuff in the physical universe. But if your underlying belief is that I'm an unhealthy person, is that I'm a bad person, I'm not worthy, eventually you're just going to get
Mm.
back there again. You have to shift those underlying beliefs.
We think of humans as physical
Yes.
objects too much, but we're humans. We're not physical objects.
Spiritual as well. We have a
Yeah,
spiritual, that thing,
absolutely.
when you say, I feel bad, what is that thing that's getting small? And then when you say,
Yeah.
I'm courageous, that it's getting big. That is your
And
spirit.
I think what's interesting, so you mentioned these three domains, the physical, the mental, and the intention, which
Yes,
includes around motivation.
yes,
It's as if the next thing that we've moved into
yes,
has been not the mental, but it's been about the motivation. How
yes,
do we get more motivated? How do we sustain motivation? But I just finished reading Ron and Chatterjee's book, his newest one, and
yes,
Make Change Last. And it's as if the third thing that's coming in, it's so surprising for me, it's the third thing, is the internal thought processing and the mental side. And it's when we have all three,
yes,
then only can we start to see major progress.
yes, absolutely. At a population level, we need to make
Yeah.
programs within the NHS that are accessible on
Mm.
scale, that access all three levels. I would love to do that. That,
Okay.
we can't, it's a
Yeah.
losing game otherwise.
So unfortunately, we are running out of time today, and there's so much to cover. So we're going to have you back on. And the next time we won't talk about diabetes
Yes,
and weight loss. We're going to talk about coaching and
yes,
the impact of coaching. And we've just come on to that just now. So I think that's a good way to try and sort of finalize things. But one of the running narratives throughout this was about GLP-1s
yes.
and should we be using GLP-1s? What's the alternative? So I would love to hear Liya's summary of how to be healthier to avoid type 2 diabetes, maximize health, especially from a metabolic side, and take the focus away from just weight loss. What would be your prescription for people to try and do that?
My prescription is to believe in yourself. The number one thing is to believe that you can do this. You are enough to do this. It is much simpler than we are making it now. We're overcomplicating this thing, and they're actually using this third universe to really help you to vision. There's, to really imagine, really feel how it is to be that healthy version of you. And then in the physical universe, it's just simple things. It's what you know already. It's to regularly exercise, to monitor how regularly are you exercising, eating, they're filling your, what the healthy foods are, what the healthy carbs are, what a good protein, what good clean protein looks like, what good fats look like. It's common sense. Eating good food, to exercise, to believe that you can be that person, and ignore the BMI and ignore your weight. It doesn't matter. Even if they go up, it doesn't matter. If you keep doing those things, you will be improving the ratio of your muscle.
Thank you so much. It's been really good having you on today.